Welcome back to Analysis. The recent deployment of Ethiopian forces in Somalia may deepen the humanitarian crisis that ordinary Somalis bear on a daily basis. Troops are concentrating in Badawa, the city that fell under the control of al-Shabaab between 2009 and 2012. They have the strategic aim of clearing the city of all insurgent-related activity. But how will Somalis cope in a city considered to be one of the most important economic centres in south-central Somalia? Will this latest intervention affect the ongoing food crisis, economic stability and the livelihood of the surrounding population? And can the troops alleviate some or any of these problems? Joining me in the studio is Emanuela Rizzo, Executive Director at Somali Relief and Development. And on Skype we have Idil Abdi Osman, a doctoral student from Cardiff. On the phone we're rejoined by Mohamed Aluso and in the studio by Douali Youssef. Welcome back and welcome to the programme, Emanuela. So what do you think the likely impact of this will be on the humanitarian crisis?
The humanitarian situation has improved since the famine of 2011 in Somalia, even though slowly, but we can see some positive changes. The deployment of the new troops does not necessarily need to a link between the humanitarian crisis and what this can be seen as an impact, whether I believe that it might have a more political impact rather than a humanitarian one. What is clear for Somalia is that years of civil war, recurrent drought and floods, and in November we had the recent flood again in the south of the country and in the Puntland. So those are the real challenges Somalia is facing at the moment, alongside security and political challenges. So I'm not that sure that this new political engagement or military engagement will have a direct effect on the humanitarian situation. For sure will make people more scared and more afraid.
Douali, what do you reckon?
The situation will be worsening, and in foreign troops always is been difficult for Somalians. We believe as a Somalians has been not to listen to as a public. And also, Somalia always been denied their rights as other nations. I mean, there's a government in Mogadishu now, but the government cannot, function it, because why Ethiopian troops is being given so much money, so much equipment rather than Somalian troops. The Somali troops weren't equipped, weren't fed well. And they don't have, they are the real army for Somalians. And defeating al-Shabaab has to come from Somalians, not the Ethiopians. And this is a disguise, Ethiopian are disguising to conquer Somalia and to conquer, and they become the big powers in the Horn of Africa. They had in war in 2000 with Eritrea and holding the Eritrean territory. Now they want to hold all parts, because Ethiopia is a lockland country. They want to reach every part of Somalia. Now in Somaliland, they want to be part of it, and they will conquer every part of Somalia. Unless the international community recognize and give consideration to the government, to the people of Somalia, this problem will continue. And the war on terror is devastating Somalians. The drones are killing, the Kenyans' air forces are bombarding many parts of the southern of Somalia, but nobody, there's unreported world. And many of us, we're very angry because we feel anxious international community are not considering the death of our people. They're considering about security. Security will come in the name of the Somali people, the government of the Somali people, and the will of Somali people.
Okay. Idil, let me put that point to you, that there can't be a kind of a fundamental addressing of any humanitarian crisis without a government that has legitimacy in its own territory.
I think there might be a possibility. Obviously, we do need to consider the fact that the political effect that it will have will probably be more larger in extent in comparison to some of the humanitarian impact it might have. But if we look at the areas that have been vacated by al-Shabaab when the AMISOM troops came in, for example, in Mogadishu, humanitarian aid has now been able to be delivered in Mogadishu. So the same might be possible if the AMISOM troops now, with the addition of the Ethiopian troops, are actually now on the 22,000 numbers that was mandated by the UN Security Council, which means that they can bolster the offences that they can carry out in the southern regions that are under the al-Shabaab control. So that means that the areas that are now under al-Shabaab control that do not have access to humanitarian aid can possibly receive humanitarian aid. Now, there has to be made a point in terms of the hostility that Ethiopia obviously has created amongst the Somali people, given the fact that they've committed a lot of atrocities in 2006. So that might play a complexity in terms of the humanitarian aid that can be delivered, but I don't think that it's completely impossible.
Okay, Mohamed Alusu, finally, on this question, do you think that the African Union forces are making it more possible to deliver aid and relieve the problem, or do you think that the Ethiopian deployment will undermine that capacity?
As you know, the military always maybe it could improve the delivery of aid in urban area or in cities or something displaced, but always outside of the urban area will be under control of anyone else. So that will be, and the military intervention will escalate the humanitarian crisis and human rights abuses, because normally the military and the behavior and the tactics they have used, they will restrict the movement of transportation, movement of people, and the people will not have access to the markets, and they will treat inhumanly even every citizen that they suspect, because they wanted to protect, you say we are protecting our security. So normally, the improvement may happen in some small cities or urban area that the Baydaba downtown, but it cannot even go to the outside of normally, because the military, as you know, the operation will take from one town to another town, and they have always to make sure that, they protect their, military. They even to provide food, water to their military, they will use the resources of the local population. So I think they will create more problems for the local population in any area that these forces will be deployed.
Right, Manuel, I mean, there's a series of questions there, that it's not simply about the delivery of aid, it's about the human rights abuses, about the political instability, which may impact on the delivery of aid, and about the capacity to get beyond the urban areas. So on that cluster of issues, what do you think?
The point is that Somalia has been always a very difficult humanitarian setting to work with. At the moment, there are more than 137 international organizations operating in Somalia, which means that there is a huge capacity of operating in the country. What we should really look at is the capacity of reaching out the most vulnerable and those who are not in the urban areas, which is one of the main key elements in delivering aid to Somalia. And then there are a few elements that has been always discussed within the Somali advocacy group with the Foreign Office in the UK and in other advocacy groups, which is how much the counter-terrorism measures are impacting on the organization which are trying to deliver aids in Somalia. There was a recent report produced by ODI on the work done by the international organization during al-Shabaab period in Somalia and how those organizations have been able to deliver it. And one of the main concerns was that most of them were not able to deliver, not because of al-Shabaab, but because they felt insecure and they were not ready to pay the price of facing counter-terrorism measures, which means basically the disruption of the work of organizations with 10 or 20 years experiences.
So really what you're saying is that report in some ways underlined the point that Mohamed Alusu was making, that, that in a kind of counter-terrorism war zone, it's very difficult for that kind of humanitarian operation to take place on a systematic and ongoing basis.
There is a major problem when it comes to conflict areas Somalia is one example. Syria nowadays is another example. Afghanistan was an example where the humanitarian organizations, which are supposed to respond to the principle of impartiality and neutrality, are facing a lot of challenges in responding to those principles because of the international legal framework. And most of the organizations felt insecure in Somalia. And I remember in 2011 I was there. We had huge issues because the simple negotiation action you are gonna take in order to deliver aid in certain areas, Baidoa is one of the main areas where we had a huge number of displaced people, was absolutely not a solution. So you had to go through local organizations which are doing a great job in order to deliver aid. But I won't feel that concern about the deployment or the joining of Ethiopian troops within the AMISOM contingency, especially if we look at human rights issues. AMISOM had human rights issues and violation and protection issues way before the Ethiopian troops joined them. So it's a critical situation, for sure requires a lot of analysis, and for sure new ways of delivering aids should be studied and approached.
Okay, well, look, we've been examining in the programme now about what's going in to Somalia, but just let me ask you a little bit about what might be coming out of Somalia. Is there a chance that the humanitarian crisis might spill over into neighbouring countries? Is there a chance that the political instability will move out into other countries? Is it already, as it seems to be, spreading the influence of Al-Shabaab?
Might be, but if we look back to 2006 before, there's no insurgency and there's no Al-Qaeda based in Somalia, and there's no lot of insecurity artists today. What we have seen as a Somalian for the last 8 years, I mean, foreign troops conquering Somalia, dividing and using their interest, and they see Somalia become a commodity of the world or business place where even the leaders being elected by the foreigners, especially the Kenyan and Ethiopian, is hand-picked up by the Somali leaders and choose the right one who go to their side or working on their interest. But overall, if you look at the Somali people, I mean, we would like to have an Islamic journal to go into the public in Somalia, in UK, and ask how they feel the Ethiopia now representing African Union in Somalian peacekeeping. You know, every single Somali asker, they said, we don't want Ethiopia present in Somalia and create this, because they are not. They are not peaceful makers. They are the most tyrannical government in the Horn of Africa.
Let me just stop you there, because I want to bring Adil in here. Adil, do you think that there's a chance that what's really happening, as has happened in other places with other foreign occupations, is that it simply spreads the terrorism?
Well, you know, violence inevitably breeds violence. This is what we can see all across history, where, you know, whether it's in Somalia or in other parts of the world. Afghanistan has been mentioned by my colleague, the one that's in the studio with you right now. You've got Iraq as well. So, you know, there needs to be a political approach, a political solution that has to be incorporated into the military operations that are going on at the moment. Obviously, the need to engage militarily is led by the US, you know, with their war on terror foreign policies. The UN is supporting this as well. But if you look at some countries in Europe, for example, they are much more inclined towards having some sort of dialogue taking place. If you look at how the UK dealt with the IRA, for example, you know, it wasn't through, the solution did not come from military operations. It came from sitting on the table, across each other, face to face, and coming up with a way that they can work together without having to commit violences. And I think a similar kind of approach has to, you know, kind of take place, you know, in Somalia. I know obviously, you know, the UK is dealing with a different environment than what Somalia is dealing with, but nevertheless, violence cannot bring a peaceful solution if you engage it.
Okay, let me just ask finally, because we're just getting towards the end of the programme. Mohamed Luso, do you think that Al-Shabaab's operations will have now spread because of this?
Definitely. Even if we don't have Al-Shabaab, we will have other resistance movement, other, you know, armed people without even being member of Al-Shabaab because of the, the behavior and actions of the Ethiopian forces that will produce the memory of colonial rule and mistreatment. Secondly, there is another problem that Somalia faces, which is, Somalia now is become used to the training field for the AMISOM or for the African Union's forces for deployment to be used for counterterrorism in other places even. So now even we are more, become used as a field of training of the military for other purposes, for international operations. So I hope that all these things will be, addressed and resolved. And especially, as the other speaker pointed out, the solution for Somalia is political discussion among the Somalis.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there because that's our time has run out. We'll be looking at whether or not the time for the Ethiopian intervention, the African Union intervention as a whole, is running out in Somalia in future editions of Analysis. So do rejoin us.